Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time thanks to your generous support, shares and views, with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D. The Carrion Crawler was the first monster I ever fought in Dungeons & Dragons. I don't remember the character, I think it was like a human magic user with like one spell and slightly more hit points, and that monster was a serious threat to that character's life. The fear was real. Creatures that can cause paralysis have always been scary at the gaming table. Ghouls, don't even get me started. They terrify me as a player, largely thanks to an encounter with a ghoul while making my way through Firetop Mountain after a certain warlock. Those fighting fantasy books were certainly my gateway drug that led to the world of Dungeons & Dragons. I would rather run than fight a ghoul and vampires. I never want to fight vampires. Sure, maybe one of the more modern interpretations of a vampire, but back in the day, vampires were pure evil. In Dungeons & Dragons, they still are. For 5th edition, there are few creatures every player should fear. Ghosts, who can possess your character potentially forever. Chouls, who combine grabbing, paralyzing and drowning your character in one nasty package, and rot grubs, because you better pray you're prepared to deal with them and not in any way delayed in ridding yourself of them or your character is dead. Carrion crawlers in 5th edition are dangerous, deceptively dangerous. To those who have not had a long history with these creatures, just take a moment if you have your monster manual handy and look at page 37 with me. The Carrion crawler has a challenge rating of 2, quite reasonable. Very suitable for a first foray into an old sewer, a dismal cave, an abandoned mine, a lost temple, an undisturbed tomb, an entry-level dungeon. And a CR2 creature is just perfect for a simple encounter, right? Yeah, if nothing else is involved in that straight-up, perfectly fair fight, the players probably have a very good chance against one of them. But if you add in difficulty, such as difficult terrain, unusual conditions, including an encounter area that favours the crawler's abilities to traipse around on all different surfaces, and pretty much any other aggressive creature in that fight, things can go really badly for those adventurers really fast. If you add more than one crawler to an encounter, the danger increases dramatically, far more than simple encounter calculations would suggest. The Carrion Crawler was introduced in the game's first supplement, Greyhawk, in 1975. The Carrion Crawler subsequently appeared in the 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game's original monster manual and every core monster manual for every edition since then. The abilities of the creature have remained the same, just the description of what it is has gone through some adjustments. First, it was just a worm-like creature that can cause paralysis. Then it was clarified as a worm-like cephalopod, which would mean it was more like a squid, octopus or a nautilus than a worm. Later, Jonathan M. Richards wrote an ecology article for Dragon Magazine number 267, published in January 19 years ago. These days, the crawler is categorized as an aberration, and yet depicted in a far more insectoid form. The ecology article is certainly why that happened. It's close to 8 pages long, it's one of the most detailed, and I think exemplifies the style that developed over the years in the pages of Dragon, combining a story set in the D&D world with illustrations and extensive ecological footnotes. Talking about everything you might want to know about the creatures, we can thank Ed Greenwood for the structure of this style of article, and given that I'm essentially making video versions of these short articles, I owe Ed Greenwood and all of the ecology writers of Dragon Magazine a sincere debt of gratitude. Thank you guys. Carrion crawlers are territorial, solitary predators and scavengers of dungeon and cave networks and sewers, possibly even dense rainforest and nightmare jungles. Now look at the bonus they have to hit with the tentacle attack. It's +8 to hit. The tentacles do poison damage just by making physical contact, and you know exactly what sort of creatures have tentacles like that? Cnidaria. There are 11,000 species of these types of animal on the world. Well, our world, found exclusively in aquatic environments. You can recognize them easily by their cnidocytes, which are specialized cells that they use for capturing prey. These are the jellyfish, the sea anemones, and the corals. But in the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons, these types of specialized stinging cells are not only found in Cnidaria, they're also found on the tentacles of the Carrion Crawler. When the tentacle strikes its prey, the Cnidaria cells rupture under great pressure and release a coiled, wickedly barbed, highly toxic harpoon into the flesh of the victim. Not just once, but hundreds of these cells burst, turning inside out and firing a barbed thread soaked with venom at enormous speed. The process is over in 700 nanoseconds, and the barb-tipped poison thread accelerates at an unbelievable rate at that time. We're talking like millions of G-force, puncturing deep into the flesh, right through the skin layers. So when a carrion crawler hits a victim with multiple long, agile, almost self-directed tentacles, they inflict the same sort of vicious stings as jellyfish, and the toxic effects are immediate as the damage to the flesh and nerves. These tentacles are long, with an effective reach of 10 feet, about the same length of the average carrion crawler's body, if not longer, and there is an additional aspect to keep in mind when determining the full reach of the crawler, which applies when they're clinging to a wall or a ceiling. More often than not, a carrion crawler will attack from above or from around a corner before the adventurers have even seen it's there, and are quite capable of ambush, even though they have no bonus to stealth checks. Also, they are long, bloated centipede-like bodies, capable of rearing up the front section with all those long tentacles, so they can be 15 feet above the ground and still attack a creature below them. Their 5-foot upper body length and the reach of those 10-foot tentacles adds together. The tentacle attacks the nervous system right away, resulting in requiring a result of 13 or higher on a Constitution saving throw, which doesn't seem like much, but characters who succeed in resisting the poison are not immune to it automatically afterwards. They have to make that saving throw every time they are attacked and stung. All it takes is them making one bad roll and they are paralyzed right away for a maximum of 1 minute, and during that time they can try and fight it off each round, giving another saving throw to try and shake it off. But the carrion crawler is not in any way intelligent enough to employ any situational strategy, so it will just keep lashing out at that creature within reach again and again, particularly anything that smells and looks like food, but is not moving. The crawler will concentrate its attacks on the nearest target and do its very best to kill them, before grabbing the body and retreating to some shelf or burrow if it can, depositing the corpse there and waiting for it to ripen up with decay. Their bite is not as fearsome as the tentacles, but the jaw is strong enough to crack bones, and a sustained chomp can grind through most things. They have a rudimentary digestive system, more like a sac, that is capable of breaking down almost as much detritus as an otyugh, but in environments they favour, they compete with all sorts of other scavengers most of the time, from oozes to fungus, also ropers, piercers, and other cave-dwelling ambush predators. Underground species do not live in peaceful harmony with each other. Even with the plants, starved of sunlight and healthy soil, are quiet predators, covered in sticky sap or wax-lined watery tombs for the unwary. The carrion crawler has a distinct advantage in its mobility, though, with which it's so often found crawling along the ceiling rather than along the ground. And the fact that it has an alien metabolism, it's not a naturally evolved creature of the prime material plane. Some speculate that it may have originally been some sort of monstrous animal, but either magically manipulated or otherworldly mutation has caused it to grow to such proportion. The truth I will reveal later. They may very well have just hitched a ride from the far realm with some other nightmare that broke through into the prime material plane, or crawled through a portal, such as those that exist very deep in the lower Underdark. Either way, they are a burrowing aberration that can clean out caverns and sewers and then tunnel through to other places beneath the ground. They have fine senses, particularly smell, giving advantage on any perception checks involving that sense. They're also sensitive to motion, vibration, and also light, with dark vision out to 60 feet and a passive perception of 13, which would be remarkable for an insectoid. They are imperious insectoid, and they do lay eggs, but they are not insects. They are capable of laying eggs in large numbers. The average clutch is 100 eggs. They're about the same size as large wineskins, leathery, yet translucent, and appear like infected blisters that burst open when the young crawlers chew their way out 1 week after being laid. At hatching, they are 1 foot long and appear very waxy and pale, without tentacles on their head. They still have the fully developed eyes that are large in proportion to the head, but they're basically eating machines. Without the fully developed legs of an adult, they just concentrate on feeding and will eat anything around them, including other carrion crawlers. Also, the parent has no interest in the eggs or the offspring, and the adults will also eat eggs and young. So the primary danger to young carrion crawlers in their first month of life is other carrion crawlers. The young carrion crawlers will molt out of their leathery skin once per month. The process takes a day and will result in them growing about 6 inches each time they do so. So within 6 months, they will be 6 feet long, and over the course of the next 5 to 7 days, a metamorphosis will happen where they become their adult form. Now they'll reveal those long, stinging tentacles and fully developed legs, of which they have 12 pairs, 6 on the front of the body and 6 in the rear. In adult form, they continue to molt every month, taking a day or so to do so. They continue to grow and can reach a size of up to 9 feet or more. Mating and laying eggs is not seasonal, it's kind of opportunistic. They tend to do so when several crawlers congregate on a particular rich source of food. The reason why it's important that several crawlers are in the same area will become obvious later, such as if they found a corpse of a large creature, large piles of organic garbage, mounds of waste, or abundant fungal growth that they can consume. Adults grow to a deeper shade of yellow and then a lurid green as they mature. The average crawler encountered is rarely larger than 6 feet long, with at least 8 long tentacles in constant motion, waving about and feeling out the environment, sprouting from either side of their head, around their mouth, and sporting those 2 eyes on short stalks and a mouth that seems more like a cross between an insect and a lamprey. With palps and feelers, they also row after row of vicious-looking teeth. The artwork for the Carrion Crawler in 5th edition Monster Manual is more insectoid than crawlers seen in 4th edition, and is much more in keeping with the extensive lore established in Dragon Magazine, which gives crawlers a creepy blending of both insectoid and cephalopod features. However, the art in 5th edition doesn't adequately represent the actual length of the stinging tentacles, which are at least 3 times as long as those shown there. Otherwise, it's pretty good likeness. In combat, crawlers are almost always encountered alone, unless there's a rich source of food and light in the area that has attracted more of them, but they don't work well together. They just seem to be there because they're all respond the same way to the same stimulus. They tend to detect and follow sources of light and the smell of the living, particularly sick or injured creatures, and they hone in on the smell of blood and, of course, decay. Because of their diet, crawlers constantly smell like rotting meat, which can alert adventurers to their presence if they keep in mind that the stench of rotting meat in the Underdark is usually a cause for concern. Crawlers can follow along quietly behind the path of a bunch of adventurers, feeding on whatever leftover corpses the characters have left in their wake. A group of them travelling together will be distracted from their territorial aggression by the rich bounty of meals, so your party of murder hobos camped down for the night around a campfire may well find itself caught up with and then under deadly attack by a group of carrion crawlers. One might trample over the fire, putting out the light, while 2 more hang down from the ceiling, tentacles outstretched, ready to snatch up characters who leap to their feet from their bedrolls. Never forget, though, that a group of monsters is much harder to kill, particularly carrion crawlers, as those continual rolls to save versus paralyzing poison attacks are going to win out in the end, so be very careful. Create some contingency for if the party of adventurers all fail and end up paralyzed, such as a patrol of more powerful monsters that find them and take them into custody before the crawlers manage to chew off more than just a nose or a few fingers. Well-fed crawlers do tend to secure fresh bodies, dragging them to some hidey hole or shelf and killing them there, leaving them for a few days to start breaking down with decomposition, which makes them easier to chew up and digest for the crawlers. Each crawler will concentrate on one target at a time, unless the target moves completely out of their line of sight. They'll tend to chase after them once engaged in combat. However, they can make opportunity attacks, particularly if some other creature just caused them physical damage. They are almost mindless. Anything more complicated than a wall of fire moving toward them is not going to cause them to back off, and they will fight to the death. The front part of the crawler is covered in harder, more rigid plates of chitin, giving them an armor class of 13. This is lower if they are struck from behind or underneath in the softer tissues of their main body, with an armor class of around 11. It's situational. They range in size, so adjust their hit points to match. At 60, 10 plus 18 possible hit points, they can range between 24 to 78. And 1 foot long juveniles will only have 1 hit point each, but missed attacks that normally do half damage to a target will not harm them, so they either get hit and die or not. Juvenile bite for 1d4 points of damage, and they do make opportunity attacks, so a living carpet of them over difficult terrain of some huge rotting carcass, with adults bursting up out of the inside of the corpse to make sneak attacks, is quite a challenging fight. Lots of Underdark creatures will make a meal of carrion crawlers, such as black dragons, behears, boulay, ankhegs, giant ants, purple worms, and so on. Goblins, deep gnomes, and duergar will probably use some special concoction of pungent goop that deters or attracts the carrion crawlers, so they may be lured into acid-filled pits and large traps designed to pierce and impale them, so they they can generally survive most darts and minor injuries and quite a wide range of toxins, so the traps that are set for carrion crawlers may quite well chop adventurers in half, or pin them to the wall with a spear that's just burst out of a side passage. The carrion crawler only lives for about 2 years, half of that time spent in adult form. It's a very, very obscure fact that carrion crawlers are actually related to mind flayers, and the Illithids came from the same original planet or plane of existence, wherever that may be. The mind flayers tend to bring crawlers with them to any of the worlds they invade, along with specific fungal species and these creatures called amorphs, which they cultivate for their arcane and evil purposes. So where there are Illithids, there are usually carrion crawlers. Those antenna-looking appendages on the 5th edition artwork? That's incorrect. They are not actually antennae. They may just be false antennae used as decoys. Crawlers detect smell, touch, and taste via their tentacles, which is why they constantly wave them around. The rest of the body sprouts bristling hairs, usually to detect wind, sound, and vibration. Crawlers do make lairs for themselves. As mentioned, they will find a secluded burrow or a rock shelf that they can drag their prey to, or chew off chunks of it. Of larger bodies, they tuck them up underneath their body and carry them with their front legs and make their way back to their lair to feed in safety. They can't drag off something the size of a dead dragon or a hook horror though, so anything far too decayed will just fall apart as well. They can stay there and eat or grab some, lay a bunch of eggs and come back later, once they've eaten their chunk back in their lair. This means that what passes for a lair will not have juvenile crawlers in it, but very well will contain treasure in the form of whatever a victim had on them when they get dragged off and digested. Precious metals and other indigestible items will be found at the bottom of a truly disgusting slosh pit of horrid filth that only an adventurer would actually want to slop about in, searching for goodies. Still, these are the sort of places that you can find rare magical rings and amulets that few other creatures in the Underdark will go to the bother of wading into carrion crawler lairs looking for glory. Oh, and for those who truly want to know, how carrion crawlers mate. Males deposit sticky spermatophores about 20 at a time along surfaces across which they move. These sticky blobs are fist size, and the males do have a certain season in which they produce these spermatophores. When a female encounters one of these oval blobs, she picks it up with her tentacles and tucks it inside a special cavity in her mouth, one of several called a buccal pouch. This process triggers the process of egg production in the female, causing her abdomen to bloat as she produces 100 of those wineskin-sized eggs and goes looking for a suitably large corpse or other source of food. She then opens a special orifice between her 3rd and 4th pair of legs and pops out one egg at a time, placing them on the corpse with her tentacles, at which point the eggs are fertilized by the spermatophore fluid released from her buccal pouch. The entire process of laying 100 eggs takes about a day to complete, after which her body is spent and exhausted, and she will die a few weeks later. You can tell if a crawler encountered as a female that has just laid eggs, as her movement speed drops from 30 feet per round to 15 feet per round, and she will have half the usual amount of hit points for an adult crawler. Carrion crawlers make no sound other than the click and scratch of their many legs on stone as they move. I know it's tempting to make hissing sounds, but they don't do that. They respond to visual and olfactory illusions, but less prone to audible illusions. They have a very limited sense of hearing. Tentacles may be sold to alchemists. When properly boiled and prepared, they can be rendered into a potion that offers temporary immunity to all forms of paralysis for up to 10 minutes per dose. For very fresh tentacles delivered promptly to an alchemist, they may be able to brew a paralyzing toxin that can be ingested to be effective. Constitution saving throw of DC 13 if you swallow the stuff and become paralyzed for 2d6 rounds, giving a saving throw at the start of every new round to resist it. Particularly skilled alchemists can fashion a sticky goo that can be smeared on a pair of gloves and sealed up in a pouch. When broken out of the pouch and carefully worn, the wearer can make a melee touch attack that has the same properties as the sting of a carrion crawler, except it's the save DC is only 11 or higher. These gloves remain potent for 1d4 plus 2 hours though, after being exposed to the air, so quite useful. And we can thank the Ravenloft campaign supplement Lords of Darkness for that little gem. Like, subscribe, check out my Patreon for some exclusive content and all the full scripts for these videos, buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride, check out Patron Blades for a mighty smooth shave, Thanks for subscribing, and thank you to all of my long-time subscribers and commenters. I appreciate you every single day. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.